Did you ever observe a case of a thin blue line libertarian? This confused Homo sapiens that is simultaneously anti-government yet pro-governmental violence? They are often portrayed in media as actively racist, uneducated, or overall lesser type of human beings. They are white trash of modern society. In close proximity to these conservative subjects, you might find that they are actually working class or sometimes even working poor. As someone living in one of the most conservative ridings within the most conservative province of Canada, the contradictions that fit into heads of conservative workers never cease to fascinate me. So welcome, I am Anna. In this video, we are going to talk about how white culture is represented in current memes, how we are viewing white trash and conservative workers, and we will look at this book by Nancy Eisenberg called White Trash: America's Myth of a Classless Society. Whiteness is a racial concept, an invisible race, so-called, something that we perceive in Western states as a normal state of being a human. But whiteness historically has faced some of the challenges. So if white people are so pure, superior, and overall better human beings, then what do you make of white trash? And the history of white clay eaters doesn't really start in America. It starts back in Europe. By the right of birth, within Europe, it was already decided either you will be wearing fancy wigs and partying every other day, or you will be eating gruel and slaving away for the rest of your pathetic lifespan. There were normal whites, educated, classy, hardworking, and rich, and their lesser counterparts, poor, lazy, and dirty. But luckily for European nobility, the new world was looming on the horizon. Our typical understanding of colonial history goes somewhere along the lines of adventure or exploration. We imagine young adventurers and travelers exploring the untamed West. Maybe we can even look at the stories of believers fleeing persecution of church, or even cases of nobility and young politicians traveling across the oceans to create a better world, a land of the free and independent thinkers, a land that is absolutely free of lice-ridden wigs and tight pedigrees of European aristocracy. And while of course the stories which are represented to us within the textbooks are nice and beautiful, they're not really reflective of reality. Colonial expansion was a grueling process for everybody involved in it, unless you were rich, of course. Colonial expansion coupled really well with other inventions of European thought at the time, such as eugenics, displacement, land appropriation, and slavery. All very profitable affairs, unlike investing in NFTs. Though the colonial expansion posed a very serious problem for white noblemen back in Europe. If the colonies are populated by the people of color, how do you correct this grave error of nature and populate colonies with the people of the correct color? Gladly, there was no shortage of ideas among the thinkers of the time, though of course not many agreed with each other. Some would propose mathematical formulas of how many generations it would take to fix an Indian and finally make them white. Others argued that mixed-race children are completely infertile and the only proper solution to populate colonies is to load ships with women and just ship them out. Everything, including the kitchen sink, was on the list of solutions for the new world. As a result of these brainstorming sessions, two main streams of white colonial immigrations were created. First stream was made up of nobility, politicians, and governmental officials, those who could travel to the colonies, buy a bunch of land and slaves, and continue on their prosperous colonial future. The issue, though, was that this nobility was not going to build infrastructure, clear the land from its pesky residents, or managing thousands of slaves. This work was reserved for a different type of white settler. And so, to accommodate the comforts of this working class and poor white immigration, whiteness was invented. At a price of around 150 pounds of tobacco, a potato eater from Europe could shed their shell of poverty and get a new shiny label of a white settler. Whiteness was a great solution to a nobleman's problems back in Europe. On one side, you could displace people of color within colonies. On the other side, you could fit all the people that you deem to be unwanted within Europe, be they poor serfs or criminals or revolutionaries, and just ship them out elsewhere. This was what I'm calling a win-win situation. Because what could go wrong if you just take a bunch of poor and socially disadvantaged people and dump them into one single location? Guess we'll never know. Overall, by the end of 18th century, the view on white poor settlers was pretty set. They were viewed as a degenerate branch of white person's evolution, a regressive evolution of sorts, if you wish. Squatters, mountain folk, and white trash were characterized by missing teeth, malnourishment, yellowish skin, and inbreeding. Their social status was characterized by lack of education, ruthlessness, addiction, and laziness. Since white poor were denied the right for land ownership, their position in society was sandwiched right above the black slaves. That meant that working poor would often outright sell themselves into slavery due to debt, but most often worked on the land of landowner, similar to serfs in Europe. They would also be building infrastructure, doing logging, fur hunting. More ruthless jobs included rounding cattle and runaway slaves, or, clearing the land from Indians and things like that. This may or may not have to do something with the firearms freedoms within the United States. It was expected that working an untamed land would make the white settler more educated, more faithful, closer to their white nobleman counterparts. Post-colonial states like Canada or United States or Australia were not just created because a bunch of serfs went on adventure. They were created by politicians and noblemen that viewed it as a eugenics project of replacing people of color and simultaneously upbringing poor whites. But as you might guess, things didn't go quite as imagined within colonies. Land within colonies was owned by the same noblemen, politicians, governmental and military officials as it was in Europe. Right to participate in politics within colonies was reserved to white men with sufficient amount of property, such as slaves and land. Division between types of labor, participation in politics, and status of land ownership, of course, resulted in strong divide between lesser and higher whites. But of course, this division between groups of whites was coupled with a different division within colonies. Nobility and government were never really interested in providing poor folk with either education or property or any sort of social support, nor did they in colonial times, nor are they now. Otherwise, how would you guarantee that people would work on their own if they were not living on the edge of starvation? And I'm not here talking about you living paycheck to paycheck. Though maybe I do, who knows? So what nobility proposed to white settlers was not a monetary currency, but a psychological one. The settlers were guaranteed a right to be white. Psychological wage is a concept that was developed by Black American philosopher Du Bois. Psychological currency is something that white worker has, something that the black worker doesn't. A comfort of white skin, if you wish. It must be remembered that the white group of laborers, while they were receiving a lower wage, were compensated in part by a sort of public and psychological wage. They were giving public deference and titles of courtesy because they were white. Sad truth behind modern workers' movements within post-colonial states is that they are not built in opposition to aristocracy or rich elite. Instead, they are built in opposition to black, to people of color. Pro-workers movements within the United States are often built not to oppose elites or oppose rich corporations. Instead, they are built to restore white person's place in the hierarchical order of society. White trash often had to prove to themselves and others that even though they are trash, they are still white trash. All that was and is still happening while these poor white folk are still adopting and appropriating whole chunks of black culture. This, of course, makes the case of Tom MacDonald's white trash rap yet more ironic. Anti-class movements in modern America carry the same imprint of the old colonial anti-blackness. It is not a coincidence that suffrage movement was excluding black women, or that early unions were excluding people of color. In that sense, New Trump's appeal to working-class white Americans as well as Republicans' attacks on corporations are nothing new. And I do get irritated by the leftist movements that say that anti-racism would split their movement or split their cause. Because anti-racism will not split your movement, but whiteness will. It may seem like conservative workers are voting against their own benefit when they work Republican. But the thing is, they're not voting for monetary compensation. Instead, they are voting for a psychological one. They are voting for return of their status in society. Conservative voter base is overwhelmingly white, rural, working class men. And I don't want anybody to be delusional over here. These people are working class. So when we try to build a movement which is supporting and uplifting working class people, we're talking about these people too. If you poke your head on TikTok or Reddit or, God forbid, Twitter, you might find plenty of memes which are trying to reclaim white culture. In these memes, usually white culture is associated with Greek and Roman tradition, libertarian thought, inventions, and technology. Ironically, it is often associated with mayo, but unironically, it is often associated with iPhones, technology, and light bulbs. Do I associate with light bulbs? This seems quite a stretch. While preparing for this video, I found this video by Adam Calhoun from about 1 year ago, where he tries to highlight the idea of white culture. He is American conservative commentator, content creator, and rapper, though still better rapper than Tom MacDonald. His video seems to be very genuine in terms that he made it himself on his own interest, and he tries to provide a positive outlook on white culture and tries to define what the white culture is.
Have you ever heard of Europe? Without white people, this whole shit, it doesn't work. You know, like freedom and shit. We work. We build shit.
I mean, this is all pretty cool, but Homo habilis used to work and he looked like this. Not very white, dare I say. And freedom, of course, is important. It is a natural state of any being outside of states and institutions and social pressures. But in Western states, freedom is always a question of freedom for who. Though Adam does identify a more narrow issue as he goes into the video, that it's not the white European culture that gets questioned. Spoilers, European white culture is quite toxic. Instead, it is some pesky liberals that deny American white culture.
White liberals. They don't have any culture. Their culture, you want to know what their culture is? In the basement, smelling their mom's underwear on the iPhone that a white guy invented, talking shit. They would never say anything to your face. That's white liberal culture.
And I do have my own beef with liberals, of course, but I guess I am happy at least I never met the liberals that make Adam so displeased. And then he goes on and proceeds to highlight some things which he sees as part of white American culture, such as iPhones and monster trucks. But overall, Adam does fail to provide any sort of cohesive idea or concept of what white culture is.
White people don't have culture. You ever heard of unseasoned meatloaf, Mountain Dew, beer pong, flippy cup, drag strip races, punching holes in drywall, NASCAR?
Well, the reason Adam fails to define white culture in his video is because he doesn't really use a definition of culture of any sort. Culture is generally viewed as a shared experience by a group of people. For example, every resident of the United States is affected by a shared culture of civil firearm access.
Or to look at other people and judge them by the color of their skin. We should judge people by the content of their character.
Oh, no, Anna. We're not going to derail this video. Not today, Satan, not today. So in America, black people were enslaved solely based on the color of their skin, on understanding that they are an inferior race or livestock, not actually humans. This created a shared cultural experience for black people, where those coming from different corners of a giant continent, people speaking different languages and having drastically different religions, were forced to form one sole identity of a black American settler. To this day, this black identity is affecting people of color within the United States. It doesn't matter if they are coming from, free black people, or if they are coming from the family that immigrated as slaves, or if they are fresh immigrants from a completely different country, maybe even European one. Police, after all, doesn't ask for citizenship status before they shoot black men. But concepts like work or iPhones or technological inventions or nuclear bomb for that matter are not part of a white identity. They were created with people who were mainly scientists, businessmen, and inventors. Moon landing was not a defining event for white people like Neil Armstrong. Instead, it was a defining event for people who were American like Neil Armstrong. So would Adam rather see people like Steve Jobs or Neil Armstrong or himself as American or as white? And, maybe I actually don't want to hear the answer to this question. And there is, of course, white culture. In that sense, I do overwhelmingly agree with Adam. There are events and organizations that worked on the premise of whiteness and premise of white people as the main cornerstone of their ideology. KKK is white culture, so are oath takers. Indigenous schools in Canada operated on a sole premise of developing and spreading white culture. But perhaps more interesting is this section of a video.
It's okay for other races to be openly racist against white people, and it's okay. There's no repercussions, there's no anything. It's acceptable. It's actually pushed, it's okay, say it.
And of course, here you might say that Adam really doesn't understand that the racism is the institution of oppression, or this is a textbook example of white fragility. It's also textbook example of persecution fetish. And you will be right. But let me give you a slightly different perspective. What if, like many white conservative Americans, Adam fails to understand that the struggle that he and others are experiencing is not caused by their race, but it's caused by them being working class? White conservative workers are not struggling because of color of their skin. Instead, they are struggling because they are working class and working poor. They are a soft underbelly of elite American capitalism. It isn't surprising that Adam starts his video with talking about work and freedom, or you can view it as freedom to provide for yourself by doing honest work. He fails to define white culture because what he is actually defining is culture of working American. Specifically, Adam gives an example of a monster truck competition as being a staple of a white American culture.
Fucking monster trucks, WWF, that shit's real. You can't tell me no different. Leonard Skinner, David Allan Coe, if that ain't country, I'll kiss your ass. Okay.
But the thing is, first monster truck was created by a carpenter who was trying to fix his truck and didn't have parts and sort of went with the flow. Bob Chandler wasn't tinkering trucks because he was white American. He was doing it because he was working class. What Adam is trying to define in this video, and what all the internet memes are trying to define, is not actually white culture. It is instead culture of working class. It is culture of men and women independent of their origin who are working hard and honestly and then are dismissed by their employers and abandoned by their leaders. As you can guess by the way I look and by the subtle accent, I'm actually not born nor raised in Canada. When I was growing up, race was not really a concept I was introduced to. Instead, I viewed slavery, in my understanding of history, as something that rich and powerful do to the poor. And of course, I am very much white, at least under current definition of whiteness. And maybe it is the case that for people like Adam, who are extremely comfortable in accepting psychological currency of being white, whiteness is invisible. But for people who are immigrants like myself, as well as it is for everybody who is passing as white, whiteness is very much visible. I am not very much interested in chopping off any of the patched pieces of my identity and replacing them with a shiny label of being a white settler. Though, of course, racial hierarchies don't work that way, and there is not much room for individual protest. I am and will always be provided a benefit of psychological currency. Here in Canada, colonial promise of whiteness still rings true. I can dismiss parts of my old identity, the ones that I value, but also the blood and the struggle, the stories of poverty and hardship told by my elders. Here, I can truly and finally be white. Overall, I found this book quite underwhelming. It was very information heavy, it was very much dry. Cinnamon Challenge TikToks came back to my memory from reading it. I don't think I would be able to finish this book if it wasn't for the video. I don't really feel like the author accomplishes anything that she sets out to do, that is to say, talk about American working class. Instead, book concentrates on the people who broke the working class ceiling and became famous through either government or Hollywood. Undoubtedly, though, it is very well researched. It's reading like a textbook or like a history book. This is just another reminder that New York Times bestseller doesn't really mean much when it's applied to the book. This is also why in this video I took us to a slightly different topic compared to that was outlined in the original book. So yeah, do what you want with this review. Other than that, thank you for watching. Liking this video always helps, and subscribing is also an option. And after that, see you on the next book.